so back to diversity. So here's how you get diversity is evolution, right? That's how we get all the species that we have on Earth, is evolution. Now, remember, that's by natural selection. And we talked about all the different modes of natural selection, or patterns of natural selection, I should say. We talked about disruptive selection and directional selection and all that good stuff. Those are patterns of natural selection. So we've got evolution. How does evolution happen? Natural selection. Then we talked about the patterns of natural selection, the disruptive, directional. I think there's two R's in that. And then stabilizing. Several different types of natural selection, or patterns thereof. Now, how do we lose diversity? How is biodiversity lost in the world? And I'm about to explain that with a very simple acronym called HIPPCO. Okay? So I've got that acronym drawn out for you right here, HIPPCO. So the first one, H, is probably the most common one. It's been happening for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. It's not really like a last 100 years kind of concept like climate change is. Habitat destruction has been going on as long as mankind has started spreading all over the world. So the first one is habitat destruction, or habitat loss. One way or the other, the habitat is being lost. And habitats, remember, natural selection, the concept is that the more habitats you got, the more niches you got, and then things evolve into those niches, right? They adapt to use those niches and those roles and patterns in the habitat, right? So the more habitat we got, more species we got. That's the whole concept of natural selection. When you start losing habitat, you start losing species, period. Okay? The next one is one that we've talked about a decent amount, but we should probably talk about more, invasive exotics. We did a whole project on that, invasive exotic species. And you know all the different ways. They can just completely delete ecosystems, or they can eat the bottom of the food chain, or just crowd out everything. Who knows what? There's a half dozen different ways that invasive exotics can completely break down an ecosystem, but they can do it to where they're the only ones there. They delete diversity. All right, this next we got two P's. Now, it doesn't matter which order you memorize these in, but they're both important. And the first one is going to be pollution / pesticides. All right, that's critically important. So pesticides can take many forms, but it's often the advent of modern agriculture, okay? So this has been going on for hundreds or thousands of years. So is this. Mankind takes things with us. Whenever we domesticate a species, we take things with us. And certain things follow mankind, like rats, okay? Wherever mankind goes, rats go too. And that's hundreds and hundreds of years back. Now, pollution, particularly with pesticides, that's really a concept for the modern age. This is, industrial revolution and on, okay? So this is really the last 150 years or so. This next one, that's just good old-fashioned population dynamics. And we talked about this sort of briefly, but sometimes a population just doesn't breed enough, right? Certain things can happen, like they're not particularly productive, or there's a genetic bottleneck or something like that. Or maybe the old ones are the ones that breed and the young ones don't, and the older ones fetch a better price at market, and so people catch all the big ones and sell those, but then the population has no way to replenish itself, things like that. So it's just good old-fashioned population dynamics. This is the way they breed, and that doesn't seem to fit the modern world. This next one, climate change. Climate change is natural. That's why none of you you're walking to school and you were charged by a woolly mammoth, or you were attacked by a saber-toothed tiger. Okay, those don't exist anymore because the climate is different now. And so there are no woolly mammoths. However, there is also man-made climate change, what we call anthropogenic climate change. And that's been happening since we started digging fossil fuels up out of the ground and burning those. Okay, so climate change really is kind of a two-pronged process. There's natural, totally normal. That's why, you know, there used to be dragonflies the size of people, and those don't exist anymore because we're not in the Carboniferous age. There used to be centipedes that were like 8 feet long, stuff like that. We don't have those anymore because the world's not a sweaty armpit. It's not a giant swamp anymore. So there's natural climate change. Now, there is also anthro, meaning man, progenic, or genesis, created, okay, climate change. And that's going to involve concepts like ocean acidification, right? Too much carbonic acid forming in the ocean because of all the CO2 we're pumping into the atmosphere. It has to do with like coral bleaching and things like that from warming water, because we're creating this accelerated rate of climate change. Now, it's a closed system. All the carbon dioxide, all the carbon compounds we're digging up out of the ground and we're burning, those used to be in the atmosphere in the Carboniferous age. But they've been locked up in the ground for millions of years. And so we're digging it up and burning it so fast that evolution can't keep up with how fast we're resetting things back to a previous age. And that's why organisms go extinct, because of anthropogenic climate change. They can't evolve fast enough to how fast we're pumping CO2 into the atmosphere and methane. So that's two different processes. People always say, well, it's natural, so, you know, the CO2 doesn't matter. No. And they say, well, mankind, climate change isn't natural, it's all created by mankind. That's not really true either, okay? So it's natural, so it's good is incorrect. That's why you don't play with rattlesnakes as a pet. Those are natural, but they ain't good. They're scary, they're dangerous, stuff like that. So, like, climate change is happening, it is absolutely natural, however, it does cause things to go extinct. Absolutely true. And it is also true that we're creating some of this problem too. Now, the other one is overexploitation or overfishing, overharvest, however you want to learn that. But I'm going to write it as overexploitation. So can we exploit food resources from the world? Yes. Okay, yeah, we can. But there's a right and a wrong way. There is a limit. So exploitation means like using, to use something. To, like, if I make a hamburger, I have exploited the wheat, and I have exploited the lettuce, and I have exploited the tomatoes of the world, and I have exploited beef, or whatever it is I made my burger out of. Things like that. So I am exploiting those resources. And to overexploit is to use them beyond where they can replenish themselves. Okay, so it's unsustainable. Exploitation isn't necessarily bad. Overexploitation is bad. Okay, so one of the most common and most obvious case studies in this is overfishing of the oceans. So we've had several species of fish nearly go completely extinct because of overfishing, like cod and tuna, things like that. Well, there's lots of species of tuna, but particularly I think it's bluefin tuna. Nearly went extinct over overfishing, and cod as well. Those of you who like fish and chips. Now, one of the other ones that you may be familiar with, some ore resources cannot be exploited. There's not enough of them, period, in order to exploit them. And when you exploit them, they go extinct, right? And that would be poaching. There aren't enough rhinos for you to have your rhino soup or whatever, period. There aren't enough elephants for everybody to have ivory this and ivory that and ivory wallets and keychains, and everybody's got ivory stuff, right? Which used to be the case for a long, long time. Everybody loved ivory, it was great. Well, there's just not that many elephants. It's not cockroaches, and you don't go into the kitchen, turn on the lights, and all the elephants run off, okay? There's not enough of them in order for them to be exploited like that. And it's made illegal, but people hunt illegally, and that's called poaching. So here we have, toward the end, HIPPCO. This covers a lot of information now. Habitat loss or habitat destruction, invasive exotic species, some things go everywhere man goes, pigs, rats, roaches, fire ants, that sort of thing. Pollution and pesticides. Now this covers a huge topic, and this is going to be getting close to half the test is about pollution. So if you ever don't know what to study, make it pollution. In fact, this is a real good list of things to study on the AP Environmental Science exam. Pesticides, and that could be anything from ant poison, roach poison, wasp poison, all sorts of stuff. And now, a lot of times those pesticides end up killing non-target species. They don't end up killing what you wanted, they killed everything. And then sometimes that pesticide, it rains, it runs off in the water, starts killing stuff in the water. Well, you may not have intended that. The farmer probably never intended that. Most farmers don't wake up and go, you know what? I think I'd like to destroy the world today. Let's just kill everything. Most people don't do that. Those people exist, but usually it's not farmers, people that make their living off of the land, okay? It's unintentional, so it's very difficult to, stop something like this. And also, most of this is non-point source pollution. It's almost incredibly difficult to figure out where it's coming from. Population dynamics. Some animals not cut out for the modern age. They don't breed fast enough, right? Or for whatever reason, their population doesn't seem to recover. Climate change. A lot of species lost to natural climate change, loads of them. There are 6 great extinctions, and only one of them has been brought about in mankind's lifetime. The other 5 were by natural climate change, and those were huge extinction events. So natural climate change causes extinction. Climate change can also be on our hands. Overexploitation, that's overfishing, poaching, just using way too much resources. So that really comes down to human greed, right? Where is enough? When do we have enough? When is a piece of ivory enough for you, right? A lot of times, it's never enough. And mankind always wants more and more and more. And that's what's led us to what's on that board right there. All the ways that we lose species.